This is Reality Dispatch, written by Jim Mintz.
There was a car park that sat in the basement of the 4-story building that housed a fleet of cars that serviced the firm. The executive allowed the staff to take these out for client calls under the strict provision that they were to be returned to the basement car park at close of business with their tanks full. Gloria refrained from ever using the fleet. She was happy to rely on taxicabs to visit clients or attend hearings. However, a new influx of partners had found this habit to be an expense they were not willing to continue. "Gloria, you're racking up some serious red on the company cards. We need you to use the cars like everyone else when you go out to see your clients. Please." "End of story," explained Darren, the CEO. He had called her in after a board meeting that showed the dire state of the company's books. He was compelled to quash any and all unnecessary expenses. "But," she began to protest. "No buts, Gloria, please. You are dismissed." She exited his office and felt the hot sting of the eyes of her colleagues on the back of her neck as she made the long walk back to her cubicle. Whether they were looking at her or not, she felt like they were. She booted up her laptop and looked at her calendar. It was 11:17 in the morning, and she only had one meeting at 3 on Dayhana Drive. The McMahon family. They were assessing the prospects of joining a class action. They had initially hired Procter & Procter to assess their eligibility. Gloria was to go over with a contract for service for them to sign. It was her hope that she could use the 40-minute cab ride to read over the paperwork. She swallowed hard. She hated to drive. She sat in the driver's seat of the all-white Toyota Hybrid with the firm's logo blazoned on the side. She started the engine and held on to the steering wheel tightly as she watched others arrive in the basement garage, boot up their vehicles, and drive out. "This is ridiculous," she said to herself as she put the car into gear and pressed her foot down onto the accelerator. She eased the car out of the drive towards the electronic doors that opened upon her arrival, signaling the entrance into the great wide world. The unknown was that her life was placed at risk just as it had been that fateful day. The day she reminded herself never to remember. "Okay, this is good. So far," she said as she veered out into the traffic that trailed down Ventura and Sioux. "I can do this, just like riding a bike." There was a pounding in her ears that rang out over the speakers that automatically played the Los Angeles talkback stations, and she didn't hear a word. The throbbing had overpowered all sound, and she was acutely aware that it was her pulse piercing her ear at an accelerated rate. She was terrified. She thought she was in control, but a warm liquid flow down her thighs told her otherwise. "Shit!" she cursed as she looked down at the spreading pool. She looked up and slammed on the brakes as she saw the approaching van, alight in flames, cruising down the freeway in the wrong direction. Cars were swerving in each direction to avoid the oncoming vehicle. Gloria knew it was too late for her to swerve. She unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the driver's side door and jumped out of the driver's seat and onto the hard bitumen. The adrenaline masked the pain she would later feel from the ripping of skin on the blacktop of the road. She rolled uncontrollably from the impact and began to slow. She stopped in a position to see the smash of the company car crack head-on into the flame-licked van and explode on impact. She could not look away from the light show that filtered across the motorway as more and more cars stopped in the middle of the 8 lanes to assess and assist in the situation, but they were all quick to retreat. For the origin of the van foreshadowed the arrival of 1,000 citizens running for their lives from a wall of Marines that flanked them from the north. Gloria stood to see the masked, flag-waving citizens, numbering in the thousands, pass her as they ran at speed. "Get out of here!" one of them managed to yell at her as he passed. Her head turned to see him sprint past the burning vehicles and overtake the others who had stepped out of their cars to watch on in curiosity. Some of the protesters had jumped behind the wheels of cars that had remained parked, kicking the drivers out with force as they accelerated away from the scene. She turned to see the flank of Marines marching in one line, emerging from the smoke and fog of the tear gas that foreshadowed their arrival. They were all masked, all armed, and all holding something in their hands that could inflict force. For an instant, she crouched down to nurse her wounds. Her arm had been scraped considerably and would definitely require medical attention. She felt a graze on her knee and realized that it ached in severe pain as soon as she placed pressure on it to walk. She looked up towards the soldiers again and wondered if they would take mercy on her, simply step over her on their way to the others who had fled. A man who had parked his car to assist in the burning vehicles pressed himself against his own car to move out of the way of the oncoming soldiers. He had hoped to be ignored also. Instead, he was accosted, thrown to the floor with his face hitting the asphalt. His hands were secured with cable ties and a baton was smacked into his back for the anticipation of any resistance. Gloria panicked. She stood on her one good leg and began to hobble away from the soldiers, pain searing up her leg, giving her shivers and the feeling that she wanted to faint. She didn't care. The threat from the soldiers was real. There was no distinction made between protesters and civilians. She didn't want to be mistaken for someone else. She didn't want to be caught in the middle. And yet here she was, on top of the freeway that overlooked the city. Nowhere to run, not that she could. The only escape was the road ahead, and there was no guarantee that she would make it. She could not run left or right. The freeway sat above a 50-foot drop. It was certain death to risk the jump. She needed to keep moving forward. She felt her knee give out. She fell to the floor. She knew it was a matter of time before she was placed face down with her arms tied. She could run no longer. She placed herself in the arrest pose. She placed her hands behind her back. She waited. She could hear the march of their boot heels progress up the freeway in formation, the yells of the protesters growing more and more distant. The boots were close. She felt them 2 feet away, then a foot. Then the boots appeared on either side of her and click-clacked along the asphalt on either side of her head, avoiding her altogether. The flank was deep, and each boot stepped to avoid her. A pinch from a boot, pressing her leg against the ground, gave off a sudden jolt of pain, but the vast bulk of the soldiers aimed to avoid her as she lay there, hiding in plain sight. The boots dissipated and she was alone. The train of soldiers had moved on to the beast that caught their eyes.
For more stories of fact-based fiction, head to jimmins.substack.com.